Okay. There are a lot of stereotypes surrounding women who become exotic dancers. And for quite some time, I've been thinking, well, from the time that I mentioned that I was an exotic dancer, it's like, well, this is going to take a little bit of explanation. Um, there's a lot that went into my making the decision to become an exotic dancer, and there are a lot of really very negative stereotypes surrounding that profession. So I should probably address that, you know? There's this idea that we're all really, really loose, slim, slutty. Some of us, there's this idea that we're all prostitutes. There's this idea that we're really only doing it so that we can get attention because our parents didn't love us enough or something. I don't know. I think it's like a lot of people say you have daddy issues. I don't even know what daddy issues are, but I guess, that's what people think. Um, let's see. Drug addicts. A lot of people think we're all drug addicts. There's things that people think about people who become exotic dancers. So I thought it would be probably a good idea at some point to make a video why I became an exotic dancer. And that's a long story. So I'll try to make it brief, but there's a lot that goes into that decision. At least for me, there was a lot that went into that decision. So let's go way, way back to the very beginning. When I was a toddler, I got diagnosed with a stupid health problem. It was stupid. It was a dinky, minuscule, dumb, inconsequential health problem. People have health problems. Everybody's got health problems, little teeny things, Some people have an allergy to peanuts. Well, peanut allergies can be big. Let's find something really small. Some people get I can't think of anything, just little teeny dinky health problems that people have. Sometimes some people are more prone to ingrown toenails or something like that, it's not a big deal. Little tiny thing. And it stayed a little tiny, not that big a deal kind of thing until I went to elementary school and my teachers didn't think that it was a real health problem. And so my doctor had given me some medication for it because, it's not a very pleasant thing to experience when it flares up, and it has acute flare-ups. So when it flares up, take the medication and then go sit down somewhere quiet for 5 to 10 minutes, and that should give the medication time to work its way through your system and take effect, and then you can get up and go resume your normal activities. So fair enough. I was in class and we were doing an activity and it caused a flare-up because different things will trigger flare-ups. I hate to use the word trigger. I know there are issues around that word these days, but it will physically trigger a flare-up. That is the medical term for it. And so I was in class, little teeny kid me. I was probably about second grade or something. I had a flare-up, so I take my medication and I go off and I sit down, and the teacher looks at me like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Well, I'm sitting down for 5 to 10 minutes like the doctor told me to." They're like, "No, you're not." Which, from a teacher's standpoint, I suppose that's understandable. It's like, what kid are you going to let just go, skittering off in the middle of class to just sit down for 5 to 10 minutes while they wait for their medication? I guess a reasonable teacher might, and maybe my parents had informed the teachers beforehand that every time I take my medication, I need like a 5 to 10 minute break, or, something. Maybe if things had been done differently, the end result would have been different. But as it was, no, you're not taking a 5 to 10 minute break. Get back to class, get back to work. Turns out that if you don't take that 5 to 10 minute break when you take the medication for the acute symptoms, the medication does not affect the acute symptoms. And so it didn't actually help me when I had flare-ups of my problem. But that's okay. It's just a piddly, annoying little health problem. It's not that big a deal. Except if you keep on having flare-ups and you keep on triggering it, the flare-ups start to get more severe because you never really fully recover from the most recent flare-up before the next one happens, and so it begins to start a snowballing kind of effect. In its more severe forms, this little tiny insignificant health problem kills people. People die. Every year, a handful of people die from this little stupid insignificant health problem, which, by the way, my teachers did not think was a real health problem. They and many people that I've met have been very convinced that it is in fact an imaginary health problem. Like, not to give too much away or too much information away, when I was young, everybody was getting diagnosed with ADHD. I guess at the time we were told it was ADD, but then they switched it over to ADHD. But anyway, everybody was getting diagnosed with it. Everybody and their mom. There were kids in my class who were getting diagnosed with it. It was all the rage, I guess. And I got diagnosed with it. They didn't know what was wrong with me. Well, that's a little farther down the story, but basically my grades were really bad and I wasn't doing well in class and they didn't know what was wrong with me. So they brought me in and tested me for ADHD and it was like, oh yeah, she's got it. Give her some Ritalin. And my parents bought me some Ritalin, and I remember hiding it in the very, very back of the medicine cabinet and lying to my mom and saying that I'd taken it when I hadn't, because I knew that I didn't have ADHD. I didn't have any of the symptoms of ADHD. I was just a problem child and they were trying to make the problem go away. I was in either the 4th or 6th grade, I can't remember. So I was anywhere from 10 to 12 years old and I already knew that I was a problem and they wanted to make the problem go away. Anywho, yeah, my health problems started getting a little bit bigger with the passage of time, Months went by, years went by. Every day I would come into school, I'd have a flare-up, like clockwork, actually. Same activities were causing it. I mean, I knew what my triggers were. I'd go into class, I'd have a flare-up. My teachers would be very annoyed with me because I wasn't doing as well in school because I was getting increasingly sick. The really severe flare-ups that people can have, it will make you groggy. It will make it difficult to think clearly. You will have trouble concentrating. You'll be lethargic. And I mean, ultimately, if you go far enough down that deep, dark rabbit hole, because if you're exposing yourself to a trigger and you have a flare-up, stop exposing yourself to the trigger, right? But if you keep exposing yourself to the trigger while you're in the middle of a flare-up, the flare-up just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and, well, bigger. If you go far enough down that road, eventually your muscles will stop working and your body will collapse. And that happened to me when I was 17. I collapsed in a hallway and I was lying there and I was watching my symptoms spiraling farther and farther out of control. And I knew that I had approximately 4 minutes to live. It turns out I was wrong. I actually had something more like 6 minutes left to live, but it was killing me. It was definitely killing me. That much is very certain. And any medical professional would tell you that. If they had seen me, I've told people about my symptoms sometimes, medical professionals, and we all know that it was a bad situation I was in. I did not expect to live. I did live. I did survive. It turns out that dying from that disease is a very long and somewhat agonizing process, which is another reason that I'm not going to mention which physical ailment I had, because I met a guy who was widowed by it. And one of the questions he asked me was, did my wife suffer? Yeah, dude, she suffered a lot. But I'm not going to be the one to say it. I'm sure she felt fine. So we won't be mentioning the name of my little health problem in this video because it does kill people, and we're not mentioning that. If you have lost a son or a daughter or a spouse to this disease, I don't want to be the one to tell you that it's really, really miserable. Dying in misery is not necessarily as bad as it sounds, dying in fear, I think, would be worse. And I think the reason that I survived collapsing in that hallway at the age of 17 is because I was very ready to die. I had suffered enormously at that point in my life. I was in, well, mortal agony, like literally mortal agony at that point in my life, right there in the hallway. That's mortal agony. I know what it feels like. It's not fun. I was ready to die. Dying seemed like the quickest, shortest route to not feeling this way ever again that I could think of. And seeing as how I had gotten there by being a good kid and doing exactly what my teachers told me to do, it was like, well, I'm ready to go out. I'm tired of this life. I've been in a lot of, pretty bad situations. I'm ready to go. Let's do this. What's on the other side of that dark door? Let's find out. One of the things that kept me alive is the fact that I was so calm. I wasn't remotely afraid, and it saved my life. Because if you're afraid, that can exacerbate your symptoms. Anyway, that wasn't the only time I had a very, very bad flare-up. I had one when I was 14. When I was 14, I ended up in the ER. And I was bedridden at home, bedridden. For 7 days after that, my mom had to give me medication every hour on the hour. And at the end of those 7 days, my doctor looked at me and said, well, oh, and I wasn't just bedridden, like sitting in bed with like a sniffle or something. I was in a semi-conscious state. I was like staring up at the ceiling in this weird haze and not entirely very aware of my surroundings. Like, it was not a good time. But yeah, at the end of that time period, my doctor said I was healthy enough to go back to school. So my parents took me back to school, and the first thing my teacher said when they saw me again was, well, if you're healthy enough to go to school, you're healthy enough to do that activity again. And so I did it because I always did what I was told. I was I was a good child. I don't know. I tried real hard. And no matter how hard I tried and no matter how hard I worked, I was always a disappointment. No matter what I did, I failed to do what I was told to do. And no matter how hard I pushed myself far beyond any reasonable limits into deep physical agony, it still wasn't good enough because, oh, well, you're not doing as well as the other kids. Ignore the fact that I was working at an extreme handicap compared to the other kids. I wasn't doing as well as they were, so, it wasn't good enough. It was never good enough. My GPA was horrible. Big surprise, I know. So graduation day came, and my fellow students left our small, isolated, rural hometown to pursue their future lives, to become doctors, nurses, lawyers, engineers. They went off to go be all the wonderful things they had been told that the future had in store for them. I was ideally suited for a long and promising career in entry-level positions. I didn't have any scholarships. I spent 1 year in the local community college, which I hated so deeply that I was relieved to drop out of it. I wasn't physically healthy enough to join the military because my body was shot to hell. My health was destroyed. I didn't have the greatest of social skills because I had spent the last several years of school, and, after I got out of school, I spent several years habitually isolating myself from people, isolating myself from my family, from my friends, from anybody who could see what was happening to me or might notice what was happening to me. I don't know why the isolation started up so much. Um, I don't know why I did that. I know that that's characteristic of certain types of issues, and I definitely had, I won't say definitely, I probably had certain types of issues with what was happening to me, but I don't know how my physical problem, like logically it doesn't make sense how my physical problem would cause me to isolate myself from other people, but it's kind of, it does make sense in a weird way. First of all, I was being told regularly by my teachers my symptoms were all in my head. They weren't real, so, just push through them, despite the fact that the more I pushed, the worse my symptoms became. So it kind of does make sense in a weird way that I would just slowly start closing myself off from the rest of the world year after year, day after day. Just, I became a little bit more distant from everybody else with the passage of time. So, after graduation, all my friends, they all went off to pursue their glorious destinies, and I stayed in my small, geographically isolated hometown with no grand future or destiny waiting for me. And the people who met me didn't meet me at all. They met the facade that I had put on all the walls that I had built up around myself to keep myself safe from all the rest of the world, because I didn't trust anybody. And I mean, that makes sense too. I mean, it wasn't just the fact that my teachers were making me do things that were incredibly physically damaging to my health. I became a problem child. I was always that kid who was always kind of glazed over in class, must be daydreaming or something. One of my teachers recommended to my parents that maybe I was an epileptic and I was having petit mal seizures during class, and that's why I always seemed so glazed over. But I was always, really out of it, it seemed. And I wasn't a good student, and I wasn't the kid that people liked. My teachers always were struggling with me, and I was always inconvenient. And they didn't want to have to deal with me. And so kids are clever. They pick up on stuff. They knew that I was the kid that nobody wanted to have to be bothered with. And so those of them who were of a bullying kind of nature always knew that if you want to pick on someone, if you want to make someone suffer or cry, or, if you want to attack someone or do something petty and small just to make someone flinch a little, well, that girl over there, no one's going to stop you and no one's going to care. And that was exactly how it worked out. I remember one of my teachers, I mean, not all of my teachers were horrible. One of my teachers, when I was in the 6th grade, she noticed that the other kids would just pick on me relentlessly. I mean, they were merciless because they knew nobody was going to do anything. So they beat on me with impunity. She felt so bad for me that by the end of the year, she got together with my parents. She arranged a special conference with them, and she was like, look, your daughter's had a really, really rough time. So if there's anything that I can do, if there is one, I'll give her one request. And if I can make that request come true, I will do that. If it's within my power, I will give it to her. Whatever it is, one thing, I can do that. And so, she was like, with your permission, she talked to my parents, and my parents were cool with it. So she went to me, she was like, look, I will give you one thing, whatever it is. If you want something, I will make it happen for you. What do you want? Because you've had a really rough time. You've been struggling. What can I do to make your life easier? And I mean, at that point, I had been struggling with my physical problems for 4 or 5 years. I can't remember. 4 or 5 years at that point. You'd think I would know, but I don't. It was about 4 or 5, I mean, they all kind of blurred into each other. She asked me what I wanted, and I didn't even think about my health problem. I mean, I knew what I wanted right away. She mentioned, would you like a trip to Disney World? We can arrange something. I told her I wanted her to get me into the AP English class because I didn't want to be bored in school because I hate being bored. And she did it. She got me into an AP English class. It was the one thing that made life bearable for the rest of the years that I was in the public school system. I loved it. I loved English. I think if I had done better in school, maybe at graduation I had one teacher, another good teacher. I had good teachers at points in time. It was just I had a lot of teachers and some of them were not so good. Um I had one English teacher. She pulled me aside right around graduation time and she told me, "Look, there's a writers college and I want you to go there." And I was an idiot. I was like, I can't afford to go to a writer's college and I don't have any scholarships and I don't have good grades. And, it sounds so nice, but, I couldn't make that work for me. I don't have any money. How am I supposed to go off to a writer's college, And so I didn't go. I didn't believe that I had a future. And I had reason to believe I didn't have a future. I remember talking with my doctors and them telling me what my prognosis was, and it wasn't good. It was, my condition was spiraling out of control more and more. My symptoms were regularly getting more severe. At 14, after I was, hospitalized and subsequently bedridden, I was told that I can't say it without giving away the disease. I was basically told that I would need medical equipment to stay alive after the time I reached 20. So by the time I hit 20, I was going to need medical equipment to continue living, like permanent medical equipment. I was imagining myself, trying to have a career, trying to have a job, going in for my first job interview with this stupid medical equipment attached to me. I tried to imagine myself, falling in love, getting married, doing all those normal people things that you're supposed to do. I couldn't fathom it, And I mean, people do. I've read about people with that exact medical equipment getting married and having kids and, persevering despite their problems and their, all that. I mean, I've read about people doing that and those people are incredible and they're really strong. But me, I wasn't so strong, I guess. I didn't come out of all that in such good shape. I graduated and I was a train wreck. So, I know a lot of dancers are very quick to say, well, we're not all crazy. Not all dancers are crazy. That's just a stereotype. And it's like, yeah, that's a stereotype, whatever. Me, I was crazy. I was alive. So at least I had that going for me. There are 2 roads out of my hometown. When you graduate from high school, you can go off to a nice college and pursue your destiny. And if you're not exactly particularly collegiate, and I'm not saying dumb, I'm just saying if you hate college as much as I hate college, there's the military. Join the military, get shipped off somewhere exotic. Learn to fire a gun or something. I don't know. Learn, go, be, do. You can do all that. I graduated and I was too unhealthy for the military and I didn't exactly do the college thing very well. There were no roads out of my hometown. Now, why would I want to leave a small, geographically isolated, podunk crap hole? Shithole. I might as well swear a little. Shithole. Why would I want to leave a place like that? Especially when everybody there either A, thinks I'm crazy, or B, thinks that I'm making up my illness because I'm secretly craving attention or validation of some sort. You know, I mean, there's got to be a reason somebody makes up an illness like that and keeps pretending to be sick all the time, right? I hated that place so much, so much. And then there was the social aspects of things where, you know, maybe at some point it would be nice to find a partner and have a relationship with somebody. You know, that's a thing people do. I might want to do that someday, you know. And it wasn't too far into my dating career, which began at the age of 18, as I've said, because my parents, like in other videos I mentioned, my parents had this rule, you can't date till you're 18. Well, I turned 18, I graduated from high school, I started dating this guy, and I realized very quickly that I had some serious compatibility issues with the men in my hometown. You know, they were nice guys. There were good men in my hometown. It's not that they were bad people. It's not that they were ugly or stupid or anything like that. Because I mean, I've got friends from my hometown who married really awesome guys and they settled down, they had kids, and I'm happy for them. And they found really great partners. But there was no one there for me. And so socially, I was in a not so great place. I was very self-isolating. And I was kind of nervous having conversations with people because I didn't trust them. And I hid behind this giant wall that I had built to separate myself from people. So most people who met me never even got to know me. They met this puppet figure that I had put forward to kind of play the role of me in social situations, but not really to be me. So a lot of people didn't think I had much of a personality at all. A lot of people commented that I was really milquetoast and just not really, you know, there's nothing to me. And that was the way people saw me. There was nothing to me because what they saw was what I was willing to show them, which was very, very little. That is not how you build a healthy relationship with somebody. And even if I had been willing to let my guard down and show people who I really was, there were the compatibility issues. I don't think they would have appreciated me for who I am. And I know I didn't really appreciate any of them for who they were. I mean, they were great guys. There's a difference between a male friend and a person you want to date. And I met a lot of friendly males whom I absolutely did not want to date. So that was a problem. I wandered in the world for 2 years. I had jobs, I subsisted, I existed, I made it through every day, one day at a time, kind of aimlessly. I tried going to the local churches because there were really only 2 social outlets in my hometown because it was a small and isolated place. You could either go to the church or you could go to the bar. Well, I was under 21, so there was no way I was going to the bar, which left the church. I went to the churches and they tried to exorcise me. I got anointed with oil all of a sudden and told Satan, leave this girl, and I left the church and I never came back. So that was kind of another thing that sort of convinced me that maybe a little bit of social isolation wasn't the worst idea for me. It wasn't like I was doing stuff to be scandalous either. I told the preacher about my life a little bit. I mentioned some of the things that had happened to me and some of the problems I had, and his solution was to have the congregation try to exorcise me because that was supposed to make me feel better somehow. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what people were thinking. I know everybody thought I was crazy, and yeah, I kind of was crazy. I probably wasn't crazy in the way people thought I was crazy, but I was pretty crazy. You know, about 2 years I wandered. Just wandered through life. And then at about the 2-year mark, maybe not quite 2, maybe more like 1.5, I started to notice that I could climb up a flight of stairs without completely exhausting myself. And And that was weird because I was very, very weak. But I could walk up a flight of stairs. And I could continue walking afterward. I didn't have to stop and kind of catch my breath. I didn't have to take a break. I could walk up a flight of stairs. And that was weird. And it makes a lot of sense now that I'm older and I've had some time to think about it. It makes a lot of sense that I would be able to do that because I hadn't exposed myself to anything that was going to trigger a flare-up for, 1.5, 2 years. So eventually, a body repairs itself. If you don't keep poking at it, it heals. I didn't know that was possible. I found myself very excited by this new information. So, I went home and I had a bit of a think about it, like, okay, so I'm recovering. What can I do to aid in this recovery process? What can I do to help me be healthier? So I sat around and thought about it for a while, and I figured I need to exercise. I need to work on my health. I have like no muscle mass. I need to exercise because if you exercise regularly, you're going to be healthier. So I need to do that. So I wanted to exercise and I wanted to become healthy and I wanted to get into better shape. I started trying to do that. I tried out some different exercise programs, and the thing about exercise is you can have the best exercise program in the world, and if you don't actually do the exercise, that program is not going to help you very much. And so I quickly figured out that I needed to figure out an exercise program that I was going to be willing to do regularly. No matter what I feel like, I need to be willing to do this thing. So I thought about it a bit, and when I was younger, I would have loved to learn how to dance, and dancing was just so completely impossible for someone with my physical issues. That was just not going to happen. There was no way, high school me was going to be healthy enough to dance. But I wasn't in high school anymore, and my body seemed to be recovering. So what styles of dance can I learn that won't aggravate my symptoms, that I can, explore and hopefully use for the betterment of my health? So I went on Wikipedia, of all places, and I looked up styles of dance. I think I looked it up on Google, and Wikipedia is what what Google spat out at me. But there I was on the Wikipedia, reading through different types of dance, and there are all sorts of dances. I mean, there's a world of dances and a world of cultures with different dances. And so I was looking up, tap dance, flamenco dance, ballet, just going through this list. And there were a lot of styles of dance that I looked at and was like, no, that is ugly. There were some of them that was like, well, maybe it doesn't, I don't know, maybe. And then just because I saw this one style of dance and I looked at it and was like, yeah, right. But I clicked on it just the same. Pole dance. It's like, yeah, right, I'm gonna learn to do that. Well, what does it even look like? I had no idea. And so I did a YouTube search, pole dance. What comes up? And, one of the things that came up, Felix King, her 2008 competition piece. It was for the Australian Championship. And it was breathtakingly beautiful. Gravity did not affect that woman. She moved through the air and up into the air just about as easily as she walked across the stage. I had never seen anything like that before in my life. So I watched the video again and again and again, and it was like, this is insane. The amount of flexibility that she must have to do some of these things is beyond anything I thought a human body could go through, and the amount of strength she must have had to do this is just mind-blowing. And I was just watching it again and again. It was like, that is bizarre. That is unbelievable that people can do that. God, I wonder what it would be like if I did something like that. I mean, I couldn't. My body's like shattered. I'm trying to work on, my goal was to eventually reach a normal level of health, not go up into the bizarre superhuman crap, but I mean, that was impressive. I would love to try and do something like that. That would be so cool. I mean, it's never going to happen, but I mean, that would be cool, right? So anyway, it was never going to happen. It was never going to happen because, I mean, it was a small, geographically isolated, like rural town. It's not like we had, hipster cafes on the street corner and pole dance studios where, women could go to learn crap like that. I mean, that was artsy fartsy stuff. And my town was a very no nonsense kind of place. They didn't have room for artsy fartsy stuff. There were shops that would open in downtown, like in the city. Technically it was a city, it was a town, but it was a city. There were shops that would open downtown all the time. And they would be these cute little knickknack, gift shops with little artsy stuff. And they would open and they would stay open for a very short period of time and then they would close down and then some other little artsy shop would open up and it would stay open for a very short period of time and then it would shut down too because nobody ever buys that crap in my hometown. Like, nobody really does that sort of thing and nobody learns to pole dance in my town. Like, nobody does that. So why would anybody offer to teach that? That's just not something people do in my hometown, especially back in those days. Like nowadays, nowadays it's been over a decade, the world has changed, but back then, I mean, it was like, yeah, right, that's not going to happen. So where on earth was I going to learn how to pole dance? Like, really? Where was I going to learn how to do that? And it was like, well, ask the question and you'll find the answer. And the moment I asked the question, the answer popped up very readily. It's like, well, we have a strip club. We have 2 strip clubs, actually. I wonder if they have poles in those strip clubs. It's like, that's a crazy idea. That is a stupid, crazy idea. And I get it. I'm kind of crazy. That's a crazy idea. We're going to shelve that one for later. I mean, I wasn't 21 yet anyway, so it didn't make a difference. It was just, it was a fantasy, I mean, there are moments, I think, when young women occasionally wonder what it would be like to be a stripper. Like, I wonder if I'm pretty enough to go up on a stage and get, money thrown at me just because I'm beautiful. It's like, it's a fantasy, you ask yourself that question sometimes, but you never actually follow through with it, right? Right? So, I mean, yeah, it's a fantasy. It lives in the fantasy world. You can fantasize about, maybe one day, going out and being a stripper, but really, let's be realistic here. Number one, you've been through hell and your body looks like it. You're not going to get money for being pretty. I mean, and that was the talk I gave myself. That was the very firm talk I gave myself. It's like, let's focus on reality here. We're trying to improve our health. This is very intriguing, but we're trying to live in the real world right now, and that's way the hell on out there, outside of the real world. So, it was one of those ideas that just doesn't go away. You know how sometimes you get an idea and it doesn't go away, and it lingers and it bugs you and you think about it, but it's like, well, I mean, seriously, how the hell was I going to get my body to do all that stuff? I probably didn't even have the strength to get my feet off the ground, much less, anything else. I wasn't going to be able to do, I didn't know how to do a fancy spin on a stripper pole. How was I going to get a job doing fancy spins on a stripper pole if I didn't actually know how to do it? Like, and there was no training process. So, I mean, how was I supposed to make any of that? No, just no. And that was that. And the idea didn't go away. I decided to focus my efforts on other self-bettering activities. I was approaching 21 years of age, and since things with the church had kind of not worked out so well, that left the bars. The bars are a good place to go out and socialize. And if you can't do the church, there's always the bar, and there's really nothing else. So when I turn 21, it would probably be wise to go to a bar and force myself to have conversations with people, because that's what normal people do. That's what healthy, well-adjusted human beings do. They talk to other healthy, well-adjusted human beings, or at least talk to other human beings. And I needed to be doing that. So when I turned 21, I was going to have to go to a bar. It's like, well, that's nice, but if I go to a bar just once and talk to people just once, I know exactly what's going to happen. I'm going to go to the bar. I don't drink alcohol, so I'm probably going to get like a Coke or a Pepsi or something. I'm going to be sitting in the corner, sulking around with my little Coke or Pepsi, looking around at everybody like, okay, I'm here. And then I'm going to leave, and that's going to be the last of it. And I'm not going to come back, because it would have been weird and awkward and uncomfortable. And that's not going to benefit me in any way. What I really need is something that's going to keep dragging me back to the bar again and again and again, even if I feel awkward, even if I don't feel like going, even if it's uncomfortable. I'm going to have to go back there regularly until I get this whole talking to people thing down, and maybe even make some friends and build some relationships that are meaningful, meaningful connections to other human beings. That's kind of important. I need to learn how to do that. And maybe even meet somebody special and form a relationship with them, and have it a meaningful relationship with another human being. Like I need to do that somehow. And in order to do that, I'm going to have to go to the bar more than once. So how do I set up a situation or program for myself so that I am forced to continuously go back to this godforsaken bar in this godforsaken town and keep talking to people? And the most obvious answer to that was, well, I need to get a job at a bar because I don't drink alcohol. So, I mean, it's going to be really awkward with me hanging around with my Pepsi or my Coke anyway. But if I get a job there, well, then I'll have to talk to the customers and, kind of socialize with them a little bit that way. And it will force me to interact with other human beings on a regular basis. And then, we'll see what happens. That seems like the most logical way to approach this. So what kinds of jobs do bars have? I don't know. I mean, I was 20 and I'd never been in a bar. I mean, I didn't know. I mean, I guess there are bartenders, right? And waiters. They're probably waiters, and so bartenders and waiters. Well, I don't drink alcohol and I don't like alcohol. I think it tastes horrible, so I probably wouldn't make the world's best bartender. Which leaves a waiter. And waiter works, right? There is of course, another job that people do in bars in my hometown. There's always that. And that would be, well, actually, that would be a very practical solution to the whole bar problem. If I went to a strip club or a bar that had strippers and I was there as a dancer, it would be a job. It would force me to keep going back to the bar, and I would have to talk to the customers. And if I'm an exotic dancer, I'm probably going to be expected to talk to the customers anyway, because that's kind of the nature of the job. I mean, I don't know much about the job, but I assume that flirtation with the customers is part of the job. Otherwise, it wouldn't be so taboo. And I would learn how to pole dance. I'd learn how to pole dance while naked on a stage in front of a bunch of people, which would be weird, but, it'll be an adventure. So, that's an idea. Now, I could just admit that it's a crazy idea and turn around and walk away and never think about it again, and that's a possibility too. Except I might regret walking away from this one, because it seems it's just one of those ideas that won't let itself go. Like, I mean, I can't stop thinking about the increasingly real possibility that this is a good idea. Um, Morally ambiguous? Oh, yes. A good idea? Well, it's starting to look like it. And the idea won't leave me alone. It just keeps kind of. There's a word that you can't really use these days, but it's an old word. It's called niggling. I remember reading a thing on Tolkien, and one of his stories was about something that niggled. And it just kind of, I always imagine it just kind of wiggling around in the back of your head, like, hey, I'm right here. And that was what was going on. This idea was not leaving me alone. And, if I didn't try, I might regret not trying. And I've tried very hard in my life not to live with things that I regret. If there's something and I suspect that I'm going to regret not doing it, I'll go do it because I don't want to have to deal with the regret of not having done it. And that's kind of what this situation was. It was like, well, if I chicken out on this, am I going to regret it? I think so. And so I decided I am going to become a stripper. I'm going to try. I'm going to go in and I'm going to ask them for a job, and they're going to look at me and they're going to be like, ha! And they're going to turn me down, and that's going to be the end of it. And that's what I'm going to do. And then I'll know that I tried, and I won't be a stripper because that would be crazy. And then I'll go back to my life and I'll try to find some other plan to get out of my hometown and possibly even build a relationship with some sort of compatible mate. And I can do all that stuff after I've at least tried to do this one thing that just won't leave me alone. And so I went to my then boyfriend, who, he wasn't a boyfriend, he was a guy, and that sounds bad. I didn't have close attachments to people, and so he was a superficial boyfriend. And that was about as close as I got to people. So, anyway, I had a pseudo relationship with this dude, and I went to him and I was like, okay, well, I think what I really, really want to do when I turn 21 is I want to go to the strip club and I want to become an exotic dancer. Is that okay with you? And his response to that, long story short, was to have one of his friends rape me like a week before my 21st birthday. Obviously, it's a little bit more complicated than that, but that's a story for a different video, I guess. I had been through so much messed up stuff at that point in my life that it really didn't affect me. I was sore for like 3 days afterward. The guy didn't hit me. He didn't need to. I'm so tiny and dinky, and he was so big that all he had to do was sit on me, and he had me pretty well pinned down, and that was the end of it. It was like, I'm sorry. I didn't put up much of a fight. And so, I was really sore for 3 days, and I was really lucky he didn't beat the crap out of me. Because, I suppose if he'd really, really beaten my face in, then becoming a dancer might have been a little bit more difficult. As it was, I had I was a little bit anxious when I went into the hospital and asked them to test me for every single STD under the sun. And then when they were asking me why, I was like, well, I don't know the guy. They're like, were you raped? I was like, no, me, no. I guess, occasionally in my life, I've noticed there have been a few occasions where I've just kind of gone really deep into denial, and that was one of them. And that's kind of how I handled it. I just sort of went into denial, and then I went on with my life, and things were cool. And I'm very, very lucky, and I understand that a lot of people don't really react that way, but it didn't really affect me much. And so 1 week later, I turned 21, and the next day I was in the strip club asking for a job, which was terrifying. But, I expected that they were going to say no, and probably relatively politely, I'm sorry, at this time we are not looking for new employees, or some crap like that, because I've been fed that line before. And I was like, okay, well, they'll feed me the line, I'll turn around, I'll go home. They hired me. It was a small town, and they were desperate for warm bodies to fill their stage. I had a pulse. my first night was kind of a shock. I went in and I had this rule. I was going to try to make $10. I didn't know how to dance. I was in terrible shape. My health was not the greatest. Like, I understand that nowadays I look pretty healthy because I haven't had any issues with my health problem for many years, over a decade now. At that point in time, I didn't look the way I look right now. I was unhealthy and I looked unhealthy, and it was kind of like, well, if I can make $10, I'll consider the night a success. And I went in and I did my shift. And at the end of the night, I called up this guy I knew who was a friend of mine. I was like, he was a gamer, so I knew he was awake. I was like, hey, I know you're awake. Bar just closed. Can I come over? He was like, sure. And I walked into his living room, and he was sitting at his computer desk, and he had all his gaming stuff on, and I had a plastic grocery bag in my hand. And I took the plastic grocery bag and I flipped it over and I dumped it on the floor. And money just fell out of it into a giant pile on his living room floor. And I looked down at the money and I looked up at him. And I had this huge grin on my face. And I was like, what the hell? Because, you hear that strippers make money, but I looked like hell. I was in bad shape, I wasn't in good shape. You have this idea in your head that strippers look like models, like really, really pretty and really, really sexy and really, really curvy and all this stuff that I just wasn't. I wasn't bad, but I was really, really average, Turns out in a rural town, I was the thinnest girl at that club most nights. There was one gal who was thinner, but she'd had 3 children and probably a lot of drugs to go along with them. And her stomach never really shrank back down after she had the kids. So she had this weird, like, kangaroo belly flap hanging down. And so she was thin, but she could literally pull her stomach out by several inches. And it would just kind of stretch. It was not exactly the best thing to see naked. And then there was me, and I was blooming with youth and fertility and fecundity and beauty and all this shit that I didn't actually know that I had in my arsenal. And oh my God, I do have this in my arsenal, don't I? I have a weapon. I've been fumbling along all my life with nothing, and suddenly I have something that I can use. Because if you're an exotic dancer, you have a career. And if you're an exotic dancer who can earn enough money to move to a city, well, then you can get out of that podunk little hometown that I was living in. New possibilities that I had never dared to dream of just opened themselves up to me. Like, I had this idea that I wasn't going to be able to build up enough of a nest egg and enough of a work history and a resume to get out of my hometown until I was like 28. And I kept on thinking to myself, 28 is too old to begin looking for a partner, like a mate, not just a boyfriend. I didn't want a boyfriend. I wanted a mate. I wanted somebody that I could stay with in a long-term kind of relationship, like really long-term, preferably rest of my life kind of relationship. I couldn't find that in my hometown because I was sexually incompatible with just about every single human being that I met in my hometown. In fact, let's just make it a uniform thing. Nobody in my hometown was attractive to me. It's not entirely true. There were a few really quirky exceptions, but they were yeah, basically nobody I could actually be with. And so I had to get out of my hometown if I hoped to do anything like that. And if I managed to do something like that at the age of 28, I'd be entering into the dating scene in whatever city I fell into, way older than most of the people entering the dating scene. Like, all the good people, men, women, I'm not picky. I just want somebody that's that I'm compatible with. I don't give a crap beyond that. All of the available people, all the really good ones, will have been snatched up by the time I'm 28. I didn't want to have to wait that long. It seemed like a really bad idea, but it was the only thing I could come up with until my first night as an exotic dancer, and suddenly I had funding. I had a road to freedom. There was suddenly this magical, very unexpected third road out of my hometown. Not college, not the military, not brains, not brawn, sex. The one thing I never thought I would be able to cash in on, and there it is. That's my ticket out of there. That's my ticket to a better life. I was absolutely floored by this. I was stunned by this. And ultimately I used that job as a way to get out of my hometown, and I found my husband and we got married, and all the things that I didn't ever dare to hope could possibly be in my life happened. And they happened because of strip clubs and because of my job as an exotic dancer. No job as an exotic dancer, no husband, no kids. Me, still in my hometown. I don't know how much longer I would have lasted in there. I kept telling myself that killing myself would be a really bad solution to a problem that could probably had better solutions available. But how many years was I going to be able to convince myself of that, How many years was I going to be able to live without hope before I finally gave up? And I didn't have to. I found a way out, and that's all I cared about. I just needed a way out. And it was there. I found it. It was unconventional, and it was morally ambiguous, to say the least. It got me out. I was able to fix my life one problem at a time, and I had so many problems to work on. The social things. I had like horribly awkward conversations with customers because it was a strip club, and so people were cycling through it all the time. And so I would meet new people all the time, and I'd try to talk to them and have conversations with them, and I was really bad at it. And so I watched the conversation just take a nosedive, and I'd be like, I'm gonna go powder my nose. It's nice talking to you. And I'd go meet somebody else and be like, hi. Like, I didn't know how to handle conversations. I didn't know what to do. The thing that helped at that, it was a job as an exotic dancer, so my job was to go and talk to the customers and flirt with people, and so they expected me to do it. And so a lot of the time people were weirdly happy to see me, which I didn't expect at all, because I wasn't some freak huddling in the corner sulking and sipping on a Pepsi. I was one of the dancers, and so it was my job to go out and talk to people and be social and get to know folks. And I started getting good at having conversations with people. I started learning how to socialize. I started learning, I've never been great at it. I still have a lot of issues and hang-ups, and I'm not very good at it, but I learned. I learned how to be sufficient at it. I started meeting guys, up until the point that I became an exotic dancer, I knew 8 guys. And let's see. Up until the point I became an exotic dancer, I knew 8 guys. And then I became an exotic dancer, and I knew, what I could almost say was maybe an infinite number of guys, because there were always new people coming to the strip club. And some people became more regular than others, but I had my pick of anybody. Turns out in my small town, anybody was still not what I was looking for. There were still a lot of incompatibility issues. And so, even if I could have chosen anyone from that club, and I could have technically chosen just about anybody who came into the club. I mean, married guys being off limits, obviously, but I didn't want anybody there. Like, that was a problem. But the money aspect, the moving to a new city aspect, that opened a lot of possibilities. And I mean, it was the best thing that could possibly happen to me. I know that's strange because, you know, there are all those stereotypes about exotic dancers, but it saved me from a horrible, horrible life that I was living where I had no hope. You can't regret something like that. Even if people think it's a dirty, slutty job that only loose women who are drug addicts do. I healed so many of my wounds in a strip club. Many wounds. More than I can talk about in one video. I'll make other videos about it. I'll talk about fixing myself, because it took a long time. It took me years. I didn't exactly have help. I didn't have like a therapist or anything. I was kind of on my own, but dancing helped me in a lot of ways that I never dreamed it would help me in. And so that was really cool. And I think that's it for tonight. I figured I better start saying this. I've been trying to avoid saying it because it seems so sales pitch like, but anyway, I'm gonna say it anyway because I probably better start saying it. If you liked the video, click the like button. If you want to subscribe, I'll probably tell you more stories about strip clubs and about how I fixed my life, and probably a few stories about crazy things I saw people doing in strip clubs. So, you know, subscribe and I'll tell you all more. And thank you very much for sitting with me for like an hour. I think it's been an hour now. Thank you for listening, and I'll talk to you guys later.